So Dylan's 12. He's our oldest. And then we have Micah, she's 5. And then we have little Quentin here, he's 7 weeks. Dylan is from my first marriage, and we moved up here when he was 19 months old. And I met my current husband shortly thereafter. We've been married almost 10 years. We just bought this house about a year ago, so it's nice. More room. So we had a 2-bedroom, now we have a 4, which is great because now we have a new baby. But it's nice. So we're thinking long term. Dylan's not going to be able to live on his own, so we intentionally bought a house that has a kitchenette downstairs where his room is, so he can have still independence, but still close enough mom and dad can keep a close eye on him. So he started with seizures at 5 months. He had quite a few. He had seizures that were called infantile spasms that were very hard to diagnose and get under control. Luckily, we got them diagnosed fairly quickly, but we had to keep upping his medication to get them under control so that he could stop having the seizures, but unfortunately it caused a lot of damage to his brain. Any progress he had made as far as milestones completely stopped, and he went back to just like having like a brand new baby again. He was no longer able to support his head. He was no longer eye gazing, nothing. It was like having a brand new baby, and at 5 months old, and it was kind of scary. And then with the lack of oxygen, he ended up with cerebral palsy as well. He's not had any seizures since he was 3.
Okay.
So moving up here was a good move for him. We officially got the diagnosis of autism when he was 7. They kept saying all through early childhood and infancy he didn't have autism, he was just developmentally delayed. And then he reached a point where they could no longer use that, so they're like, well, now we need to test him for autism. And so they tested him, and they said, yes, he has autism. I think it's more that he has like sensory processing disorder. It's more his main issue. It's a lot of find out on my own. There's not a lot of support. Basically, when we got the cerebral palsy diagnosis at OHSU, they did 8 hours of testing. The nurse came in and said, your son has cerebral palsy, the doctor will be in a minute, and walked out the door. And then the doctor came in and he goes, well, it's not really that big of a deal, it just means he has low muscle tone. But, you need to be prepared, he won't walk, he won't talk. He's basically going to be like this forever. And I was devastated to find out that my, 19-month, 20-month-old baby was never going to walk or talk. And, it took him a long time. He's 3.5 before he started walking. But if he started walking, he has some words, but he uses the iPad to communicate. And I was offered no support from OHSU as far as how to care for him. And I couldn't get a wheelchair for him because they said he wasn't old enough, and he was like 40 pounds. He was a big guy.
Yeah.
Spit up on me. And then once we got the autism diagnosis at 7, we were just basically told, okay, well, he has autism, so here you go. There was no, hey, this is a support group for you, or, this, that, or the other. They're like, well, you could probably Google something, or you could go to Autism Speaks and order, like, a welcome kit. I'm like, okay. So it's like, well, we'll just kind of wing it, see how it goes, because we don't 100% agree with the autism diagnosis because he is so social. I think mainly the seizures did so much damage that he's just not where he needs to be with other kids, and they really just don't know what to do with him. And he's, like I said, he is walking, but he's incredibly flexible. His favorite position to sleep in is to put his feet out in front of him and just fold over and sleep with his head on his feet.
Wow.
And he's very flexible. He's like a contortionist. He gets his feet up by his head, and he likes to sit and read that way.
Mm-hmm.
So he's just basically, they said that's all it is he's just got super low muscle tone, which affects like his fine motor.
Mm-hmm.
So he really struggles with pencils, pens, markers,
Right.
cutting. He can't do buttons or snaps, and he just, yeah, it affects that. And then he doesn't build muscle mass very
Right.
well, so he has the tendency to get a little chunky and then he slims down again.
Right.
So he's very active. So we found a great dentist.
Mm-hmm.
We go to Adventure Dental.
Mm-hmm.
They work really well with Dylan. They've got sensory rooms that he goes into when they do his cleanings.
Mm-hmm.
We still have to hold him a little bit down
Mm-hmm.
to get the cleanings done, but they're very patient with him. They, talk to him very nicely, and we've been going there since he was 5, so
Right.
about 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
So they've got to know him quite well,
Yeah.
and
Good.
so they do really
good
well
to
with
know.
him.
Yeah.
And I would recommend them for anybody with a normal child or a special needs child, especially.
Right.
As far as OT and speech, I have not found anything in Vancouver
Really.
that does not have an incredibly long wait list. I can't find a speech therapist for him. We started out at OHSU because that's where we got the original diagnosis once we moved up here of the cerebral palsy and started getting all of his services.
Right.
At that time we were on state insurance because when we moved up here I didn't have a job, so they put us on a long wait list.
Mm-hmm.
We finally got a therapist. We followed her for quite a while until she moved out of state.
Mm-hmm.
I think Dylan was probably about 8,
Mm-hmm.
and then we've not been able to find a speech therapist since then that would work with a child that old, completely nonverbal. And then we started working with the iPad, and they weren't up to date on technology, so we couldn't get that support.
Mm-hmm.
We are doing OT. I did not find an OT in the Vancouver area that was comfortable working with him because of his age
Mm-hmm.
and the fact that he was nonverbal. We tried a couple here, but they were not comfortable with his not being verbal and everything. So we do have a therapist at Pediatric Sensory Therapy in Portland. They're by the St. John's Bridge.
Right. Mm-hmm.
He's been going there for a few years, and it's really working well for him. He goes once a week, and he loves it. They've got
Good.
several different swings and a hammock and a ball pit and
Good. Yeah.
a slide and
Yeah.
all the fun stuff he likes. And of course all the things he doesn't like to work with, but
Right.
At
least they have something to bargain with.
yeah. So we've been lucky for the most part. They have been covered by insurance. We did change insurance in January, and they originally told us that any therapeutic services for Dylan would not be covered because he was too old. Upon further review of our policy, we successfully argued, and they are now paying for it, but that did not start until June. So he went 6 months without any formal therapy.
Mm-hmm.
Luckily, they had another client that works the same place I do
Mm-hmm.
and has the same insurance, and she was in a union meeting, and her union rep happened to be there, and she was going off on how she couldn't get these services for her child, and the union rep goes, no, that changed January 1. There is no age limit.
Mm-hmm.
And so they did a whole internal review, and our therapist called and said, hey, this is the person you need to call and talk to.
Okay.
And
So it's a job thing that they got rid of the age limit.
yeah, they
Okay.
did. Then our insurance wrongfully told several people
Oh.
that they did not have that benefit. So
Mhm.
yeah. He's done great as long as we kept him in an SCC program.
Mm-hmm.
When he was at Haug, halfway through the 3rd grade, they're like, really, he's doing well. We think the life skills program might be better for him. work on, daily living activities and things like that. It's like, why don't we go ahead and transition him in April to Fruit Valley to do that program? And I was like, okay, we'll do that. It would be great,
You can go ahead. Yeah.
It'd be great to go ahead and get him used to it before the end of the school year. To beginning of the school year when everything's new, it wouldn't be a big deal. Teacher that he had when he started it was great. The only problem was the next year school started, they had a whole new teacher, didn't know how to use the iPad, gave him an aide who did not know how to use the iPad, would not allow him access to his iPad, and it took us from September until April or May to get him moved back to an SCC program, and it took us threatening to bring an attorney in and having his ABA therapist come to every parent-teacher meeting for 6 months before they agreed to finally move him. And once they got him moved, it was like a whole new child. He was our child again.
Yeah.
Because when he was in the life skills program, he was so anxious they had to put him on an anti-anxiety medication. The behaviors that he exhibited were not good. He was lashing out, he was agitated, and it was because he wasn't being able to communicate. And I don't think people understand what kind of a big deal that is. And they may be kind of in their own little world, but they still need to be able to have their voice. I feel like I'm knowledgeable now, more than I was in the beginning, because I was pretty much told when he started within the special needs program that they would tell me what was best, and I'd have some input, but ultimately it was their decision where he went, what kind of services he got, how long he was with certain services, what they worked on, and that I didn't really have much say. But since the whole issue with Fruit Valley, I've realized I have a lot more say than I thought. So his goals are getting met a lot better for what need to be worked on, and he's got a great team now that communicate with me on how best to accomplish the goals. The one thing we continually struggle with is his pants situation. He has no hiney, so his pants fall. He can't do buttons. And he's thin, so elastic waistbands are kind of hard for him to keep up because he has no hiney and he's thin. Can't do the buttons because he doesn't have the dexterity. So we've come up with suspenders. So he wears suspenders now. He thinks they're just the coolest thing ever.
I love that.
I ask for examples on how they're accomplishing the goals and what exactly they're looking for. And so far, the last couple of IUP meetings have gone great, and everyone's been very willing to explain everything so that we know exactly what's going on. And I'm sure I kind of come across as a crazy person, well, not crazy person, but a helicopter parent, because I want everything explained and I want a lot of communication from the teachers as far as what's going on, because he can't come home and say, hey mom, we did this in school today, or I did this, I did that, I had this for lunch, or I didn't eat because I didn't want to eat. So it's great to finally, the last couple of years, finally get a team that would communicate.
And understands why you would want that. Right.
So we were doing ABA, and he was having pretty good success with that. We hit a plateau where he wasn't making any progress, and they said we needed to increase his therapy time or one-on-one time. But unfortunately, my husband's insurance won't pay for the ABA, my insurance won't pay for the ABA, and it was a cost that we could not afford to do more. And so they were very nice, and they're like, we could keep treating him, but, you're just we're not getting any progress. So you're just basically wasting your money. So they said if our financial situation changed or if the insurance situation changed, they would be glad to continue to see him. But unfortunately, neither one of those have changed yet.
Right.
But they did set up a good home program for us. So we follow that, and we, if we have any questions or whatever, we can always shoot them an email, and they'll kind of give us some feedback on what their thoughts are.
That's good.
But we kind of miss it.
Yeah.
It did free up some more time, but
Right, yeah.
you know.
And how often was he going before?
He was going every other week to the office, and then the opposing week they were coming to the house and doing home programs. They are self-funded.
Okay.
Washington state regulations state that all insurances have to provide it if they receive federal funding, the employers. Both my husband and I's employers are self-funded.
Okay.
So they're not required to follow all those guidelines and rules. From what I've observed in session in their office, they kind of just follow his direction and get him to work on his goals. And like backward chaining works really well for him. So at one point they were working on opening simple snacks like granola bars or breakfast bars, doing puzzles, playing games. He did play Candyland one time with him.
Oh, wow.
But it was not a full game, but you know, some
You got the
interaction
idea.
was good.
Yeah.
And then he likes the fishing game.
Yeah.
So they would have him count or pick certain colors and put only those in. And
Yeah.
he'd have to count. So he put them in, and then he could turn it on, which was his favorite part, was turning it on and watching them go up and down. So when he was at Marshall, they had a track team that he could join if he wanted to, and they would have the paras, stay after and help with that if he was interested. It's the only thing we've ever really looked into, because he likes to run.
Right.
Not necessarily with a purpose that we're aware of or in a specific direction. But school activities, I think, like that are well staffed to help. As far as in the community, there are no camps for him except for the sensory camp, which I don't think that they did this year. I didn't look into it this year. I did the last 2 years, but there's only so many spots, and they fill up so fast, and it's not full day, and it's like $40-something a day, or like from 9 to 2.
Yeah.
So it's more than I would pay for a newborn to go to daycare full time a day. And then as far as daycares in general, the only one that I found when he was young enough to go to a daycare would not accept him without a one-on-one person, and they wanted $15 an hour for that one-on-one on top of the daycare fees and everything. And that's more than I make.
Yeah.
So I think it's a very underserviced area. 2 summers ago, we had a girl that was recommended, and it did not go well. We found her with her boyfriend in our house after I got a call from a neighbor. So, and then last year we kind of floated between the grandmas and another young lady that watched him a little off and on, and then our nephew watched him a little bit too. So, but it's to find someone for like date night. We've not had anybody other than a relative watch him in a very, very long time. We did have a nice lady that was going to school for special education that watched him for a while, a long, long time ago, but she's moved out of the area. So someone that understood if he did have a meltdown, like when Quentin cries, he gets very upset. That person understands that it's gonna pass. It's, you know, he's not being a brat. He's not being, you know, a drama queen or whatever. That, you know, it's truly something that is upsetting to him and will comfort him, but yet be stern and be like, it's okay, you know, the babies cry.
Right.
You know, explaining what's going on to him to help him understand that it's just a normal situation, that he's okay, but yet reaffirming that you understand he's upset.
Right.
So I think that's his main thing, is not feeling that he's understood. So, yeah.
Does he have sound sensitivity as well?
Yeah, when dogs bark,
Oh, okay.
especially like smaller dogs.
Yeah. So do you think when the baby cries, is that a sound sensitivity thing?
Yeah.
Or is it like he's upset because he thinks he's upset?
It's a sound thing.
Yeah.
He had terrible ear infections when he was very small, and so it caused a lot of hearing issues for him.
Right.
He couldn't hear very well for like the first 3-4 years.
Yeah.
And then once his ears finally cleared, it was like sensory overload for him. He could hear all this stuff, and it's like, I don't know how to process it. And then he associates sounds with memories. So, like the dogs barking, that all stems from when we house sat for my mom, and the dogs got loose and they were barking, and so we were upstairs trying to corral the dogs. He was downstairs, and he was scared. He thought he was left, and you know, he was in a not his house. So it was a fairly new house that she'd moved into, so it just anytime the dog barks, it brings, I'm just guessing, that it brings back that emotion and it upsets him. Well, before we moved up here, when I got divorced from my first husband, we had SSI for him because I did not make very good money, and he required so much time spent for doctor's appointments and therapy and everything. And there was an awesome daycare that he went to before we moved up here that did all of his therapy exercises with him, and so the state actually paid a little bit extra for him to go to that daycare, for them to do all of that. But when I moved up here, it's a total different ball game. You know, we started out in Oregon for about 6 months before we moved over to Washington, and neither Oregon or Washington offer those kinds of benefits for daycares. I couldn't get on any kind of assistance at all, and then they took away the SSI because I was living with my future husband at the time.
Oh, yeah.
Because they said I had to count his income, and they actually even though once we got married, I let them know. They failed to stop paying when I got married, because that should have started counting Bryce's income.
And you did let them know?
I did let them know. I let them know I moved. I changed. They had my name changed, my address updated, my marital status updated, but I don't know where they didn't click a box because I was still sending them my pay stubs.
Yeah.
But somewhere along the line, about a year after I got married, they realized their mistake, doing some sort of audit or something, and so they can go back 2 years. And so paying back 2 years worth of SSI payments, I don't know.
Did you talk to anyone about that?
I did.
And they said that you'd have to pay it?
Yeah.
Like an advocate? Or?
Yep.
Oh.
I tried appealing it twice.
Oh. Wow.
So yes, we pay them $25 a month because it's interest free.
Yeah.
I have other bills that are more important, and they said that, you know, as long as I'm paying, that is fine.
Right. Oh, right. It's crazy. You think of their mistake.
Yeah. And I don't qualify for anything else.
Yeah.
the only advice I was given basically by the state of Washington was to get divorced, draw up a rental agreement, state that I rent our residence basically from my husband, or on paper, ex-husband.
Yeah.
And then I could qualify for all kinds of state assistance.
Interesting.
Yeah, so basically I was told by the state to get divorced, and then I could get assistance. And if I get on state insurance, they will cover the ABA, they will cover OT, speech, physical therapy, basically anything I need.
Interesting.
But because I want to be a law-abiding citizen, I don't have access to those things.
Mm-hmm.
We've always made it a very big point to live as normal life as possible. So we take Dylan everywhere. He goes grocery shopping, he goes to Costco. The only thing we really don't do are movies because they require you to sit and be quiet. There for a while, the Regal movie theater on Mill Plain did sensory movies where they'd turn the lights up a little or down a little to where it wasn't as dark, wasn't as overstimulating, and you were free to get up and roam around, bring in your own snacks. But they haven't done that in years. But it was nice.
Yeah.
But other than that, we access pretty much everything. Dylan gets overwhelmed, so we always go early, and we don't stay long.
Right.
So for the most part, we don't really have a problem. It's just, so we know what his triggers are, and we know how to best manipulate around them. But I do feel like in restaurants we do get looks sometimes, especially because he's got an iPad and he's on it constantly.
Right.
And then you have all those people that are like judging because your child's on an electronic at all times.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, yes,
That's how
and
he
no.
talks. Yeah.
So if Dylan's having a meltdown, I think, crap, I think that I have a brat child and he's just, screaming for no reason. Or they see his iPad and they're like, oh, he's spoiled. Because he has two. Because with it being his words, you can't just, oh, sorry, your battery's dead, now you can't talk. So he has two. And we generally always have one. Sometimes we have both. So we like to keep one, this is your words, this is what you communicate with. And then there are games that he likes to play, and the thing that makes him the happiest is his music. So he's got his music on the other one. So we get lots of looks when we pull out 2 iPads. You're like, really? Did your child need 2 iPads? But, there's just so much judgment from people sometimes, and it's like,
Funny.
I really honestly believe that every place that has a bathroom should have a family bathroom. I can't trust Dylan to go into the men's room by himself, and he's 12 now. He's about as tall as I am, and I get looks all the time taking him in the women's restroom, whether it's I need to go, his little sister needs to go, or he needs to go. So I think family bathrooms are needed in every store, and they need to not let employees use them, because I can't tell you how many times I go to Walmart and there's an employee in the family bathroom, and I'm like, really? I would say, no matter what diagnosis they have, they are still your child. They're special needs because they're more special. You get, extra love for them. Dylan is lucky because he's not going to have to deal with the stigmas that a lot of kids have growing up. He's not going to have to worry about, hey, am I wearing the most fashionable clothes? He's happy. Special needs kids tend to be the happiest because they live in their own world and they're not burdened with, you know, the outside drama that's going on with, you know, who likes who, you know, am I going to get made fun of because of my hair, you know. So embrace that and enjoy the fact that they're happy and just be happy with them.
I love that. Thank you.